Are you ready? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Board of Aldermen special meeting in regards to the budget workshop. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Felly,
Here.
Alderman Nemeth,
Here.
Alderman Cleve,
Here.
Alderman Presley,
Here.
Alderman Eversmeyer,
Here.
Alderman Lesh,
Here.
City Administrator Roth,
Here.
Collector Kelly,
Here.
Chief Milius,
Here.
Director Myers, Public Works Commissioner Bergman, Attorney Jones.
All right, if everybody would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
I have a motion by Alderman Nemeth. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Eversmeyer. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, fiscal year 23 budget presentation. I will turn it over to City Administrator Roth.
Okay, so thank you all for being here. Appreciate your willingness to take a night out for a special meeting. As I noted in my board report, this is the biggest, most complicated budget the city has ever put together. I'm certain of that. We have many, many different projects on the board. We are tasked with opening the Red Cedar this year, later this fall. We have about $2.5 million in federal aid road projects, Denton Road Bridge, Highway in Phase 4, and West Osage sidewalk connections. All of those are slated for construction in this year. We have a major police radio communications upgrade that's proposed. We have other, what you might call somewhat routine projects such as Route 66 Marketplace Road, preventive pavement maintenance program for this coming year. In wastewater, we have a $4 million estimate, major wastewater improvement project. We intend to apply for ARPA funding for that project. But all of these are scheduled to be in play in the next budget year. Obviously, they're included in the draft budget that you have tonight. So it's going to be a big year, lots of moving parts. So it's going to be a challenge for all of us here. As far as the budget, let's just dive right in. I presented a draft at the last board meeting. We'll work off the draft that I presented for tonight's meeting, at least for the basic overview. There's a budget message, which I've included. It's a draft. It's right at the beginning of the presentation. Presents a general overview of the city's finances, as well as some of the budget features. Budget summary, page 3. This is just a big picture summary of revenues, expenditures, going back to the 2020 fiscal year and then through to the current budget. Obviously, anytime somebody wants to stop, ask a question, please do. When it comes to our revenues, there's what I call a three-legged stool. There's property taxes, there's sales taxes, there's gross receipts taxes. Starting with the property taxes, assessed valuation. There's a sheet here from Franklin County. Obviously, we have a section of our city, of course, is in St. Louis County. The next sheet shows that. And then there's a total. Our assessed valuation has been excellent. If you look at our total for 2017, we were at $122 million. For 2021, in just a 5-year period, we're at $152, about a 25% growth rate for that period. If you look back to St. Louis County, I know it's just kind of a small contributing piece, but I mean, it's about nearly a threefold increase from 2015. And so it's clear the impact that these new projects like ADB, like West Contracting, can bring on. You see it in your assessed valuation numbers, and then there's no question it contributes to the city's overall financial position as well. Moving on into sales tax. Actually, just another word on property taxes. Our property tax revenues, we'll get to that a little bit later, but they're not the biggest piece of the pie. Sales taxes and gross receipts are two bigger shares. Our property tax rate is quite low. It's about 40 cents. And when you compare it, especially the Franklin County side, our tax rate, in fact, I think last year was the lowest in Franklin County. So that's a good thing, obviously. But then you'll see our property tax revenues are maybe not as high as some of the surrounding communities. Sales tax, this is the number one economic indicator that we track. The board has seen this in many different reports over the years. When you look at our sales tax history, back in 2010, we hit a low, 660. Now, of course, it's been several years since that time, but the trend line has obviously been up. For the most part, the floods of 15 and 17 are clearly shown in those numbers. There's no question there was financial impact there. Recently, after the flood of 17, our revenues have been on an upswing. Even in the COVID year, we essentially maintained. Right now, calendar year 2022, we are on pace to exceed the 2021 number. So our sales tax has been very good. Why? I mean, we could talk a long time about that. We as staff do have access to individual sales tax receipts. We can't share those numbers, but the picture I see is just there's a real diversity of sales tax generators. Grocery, retail, of course, is one. Services, restaurants is another. The convenience stores contribute. We have certain manufacturing entities that contribute, construction. It's really a very wide, diverse pool. And it's unlike, I mean, we don't have any big boxes. We just don't. We don't have any, compare ourselves to Eureka. Of course, they've got a big box Walmart and they have Six Flags. We don't have that. And so there's good and bad to that. If you're viewing the financials strictly from sales tax, you can make an argument that we are somewhat retail sales tax poor. I think that's generally accurate for a city our size. Having said that, we're also not dependent on one single sector. So, in COVID, for example, there were definite downturns in St. Louis County. We didn't see that here. And then ever since then, we've been really, really trending upward quite nicely.
Well, it also paid off when we had the crash in 2008. We were able to maintain, actually, everybody came down to our level, to tell you the truth. And that's when we got a lot of our construction projects, big construction projects done, because everything was coming in cheap and we were able to get that. And we're getting ready to hit another downfall, I would think, with the recession and stuff. And then when everybody else is hurting, we just keep trudging along at an average pace.
Yes, I mean, I think that I am bracing for a downturn. I just am. And we hope it doesn't happen. But I do think we're pretty insulated against it. I really do. Even if you look back in the sales tax numbers, I think the chart only goes to 08. If you look back to 07, 769 total, 2008, 773, there was a downturn actually. 09 and 10, it did hit there. I know that's somewhat common, I think, across the state, if not the nation. If we saw a downturn, would it be of that significance? I don't have the percentage numbers there, but that's a fair drop-off. I still am thinking, I just don't see that type of steep drop-off in the near term, at least.
Hopefully not.
Yes. So, moving on, page 9, the sales tax history. This is the Prop P, law enforcement sales tax. The sales tax, I don't have the exact totals here. It's generated about 1.4 million. I think that's the number. Since it was first implemented, we benefit from both Franklin County and St. Louis County. And obviously, that's enabled us to address police officer pay. It's not the only piece. The city has directed significant general fund revenues toward police pay. I've noted this in past reports. The entry-level wage in 2016 was $14.18. It's now $24.50. That is only a 6 or 7 year period. How did we do it? Prop P was a piece, yes it was, but the city also directed more, much more than Prop P, toward police pay. And the result is we have now caught up with many of our surrounding communities. In fact, I think surpassed some. There are many communities that still pay much higher than us, especially as you get into St. Louis County. But we're not dragging behind like we once were. And I don't want to steal any chief's thunder here, but we're kind of even seeing it in our applicant pool. I think that, we're attracting more candidates, not only based on pay, but certainly that's a big part of it. Turning the page to page 10, water and sewer billing history. This just gives you an idea. These are the billed user charges, not actual collections. Gives you an idea of those revenues over the past several years. We implemented a rate increase on the water side. I believe it was in 2019, maybe even 18. Sewer, we just hit last year, raised our volume rate. That was the first increase we'd have in quite some time. Sewer is still, our sewer revenues are still a little higher than water, but, obviously water's catching up.
For the sewer billing, does that include what we bill PWSD for those that are not on city water and sewer?
I don't think it does. Do you know offhand, Kim?
Does it include what?
What we bill PWSD, number 3, okay.
Right. It does, however, include the Brush Creek Sewer District. That's my understanding. Is that right? Okay. All right, so moving on. We gathered some data out of our audited financial statements to include on this next page. Another picture of the city's finances over time. Again, the bottom line, net assets, if you want to look at that number, 14 million net assets in 2008. We're not 35 million in 2021. That's a function, of course, the new City Hall, Government Center, other, major capital projects, wastewater, infrastructure improvements, so forth. But, pretty clearly we've been, improving our financials quite significantly, frankly, over the past several years. All right. Reserves and balances. This is something that we track on a monthly basis. There's a lot of variables in these numbers, but they give you an overall picture of where we stand relative to, other months. These are March 31st numbers. We will see general fund dip down over the next few months. We're projecting to be around 600,000 general fund balance by June 30. Contingency, this is important. We're at 1.8 as of March 31st, and we would continue to build that. We'll probably be around 1.865 by June 30th. So when you consider contingency in the city's general fund together as its basic reserves, we're probably around 2.3 million to start the year, which is It's a good number. If you think of the city's expenditures, operating expenditures in the terms of around 5 million, and if you got about 2.2 to 2.3 million fund balance, 2.3 million in reserves, that computes to, 40% fund balance, which is pretty strong. It really is. That's about where you want to be. We don't need to necessarily get into big topics over fund balances, but I think we're in pretty good position there. Okay, statement of outstanding debt. This is just what it says it is, statement of all of our different debt obligations. We have 2 water and sewer issues that are nearing the end of their lives. You look at that Series 2005, there's a 5% interest rate. It's been a long time since we've seen those interest rates, but we're kind of back in that environment now.
Can I go back a second? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Back to the reserves and balances. In regards to the SIDS, knowing that there's been activity, I guess I could say, with what SIDS do we still actually have?
Viaduct has been terminated.
Okay.
East Osage has been terminated.
So we don't expect those, obviously, to grow anymore, and then for this coming year, we will have whatever's, I'm assuming there's still money left in them that to be utilized as needed until
Right.
they're just not going to increase.
This year, we would anticipate the preventive pavement maintenance program includes Thornton and Viaduct road improvements. And so, assuming that project goes forward, then we would clear out all the remaining Viaduct money, put it toward that project, and then Viaduct fund would go away. East Osage, we are maintaining because it is the source of funds for the First and Osage intersection improvement project. Obviously, that's another federal aid project. The engineering starts this year. We're not into construction until the next fiscal year, if not further out, I forget. But that is the 20% matching fund share that we want to use for that project.
Thank you.
And then for the Osage one, where can those funds be used on the Osage commercial area?
Within the district, which is West Osage, there's some of the parcels have been removed. I know there are still some parcels east of Lamar Parkway that are in it. Most of it is west of Lamar Parkway. I don't have that right at my fingertips. I know we've removed at least 6.
And we're still collecting that one, right?
We are, yes, correct.
Remind me, are we using any of that for the Route 66 Marketplace
Yes.
roadway? Okay.
Yes, correct.
All right.
All of it.
Thank you.
Okay, to our outstanding debt, I mentioned the water and sewer issues, which are nearing their ends. We did a lease purchase deal back in 19 with First State Community Bank. Still have 2 years left on that. We took a loan out with Missouri Development Finance Board, no interest loan. Last year, we paid one $50,000 installment. We have 2 left. The Term 2031 Pacific Government Center, that was refinanced last year. That interest rate was good at the time. It just looks beautiful now, I think. 195. And then the Term 2041 Red Cedar project, the first payment will be due, I believe, in September. And so that obviously is a 20-year term, and then the principal interest payments over that. Total debt service we have in this fiscal year, we have $898,000 total, and then total outstanding $6.7 million. Fund transfers, I don't know that we really need to get into much of this. This is kind of a worksheet that the city clerk and I use. Make sure that we're moving along as budgeted. We do a lot of transfers, as you all know. and they're all accounted for here. Pay and benefits, our pay is certainly competitive across the board. As I've noted before, we've done very well in police in particular. What is never, I think, what is underestimated, even by staff, is our benefit package. Our loggers' retirement plan is, it's not the absolute top, but it's very near the top. And then our health insurance has just been excellent. We've actually had, our last 2 years, we either had no increase or actual decreases. Now, of course, I may have jinxed us, but we do have a very good health benefit as well. Okay, capital expenditures. I would suggest we go back to that because that's where a lot of the budget decisions will be. So if we can just continue on. The next page, I'm on page 23 now, federal aid transportation projects. Here, it's just basically a program, if you will, of when these projects are programmed per our fiscal year budgets. We did receive notice last week that our 4th Street project that we applied for this year has been recommended for funding. When you're recommended, you typically get funded. East-West Gateway Board has to vote on it, but we do expect that it will be awarded. And so that, I've listed this as a tentative. The construction for that project is in fiscal year 25. So you'll notice that obviously we then have the next 3 fiscal years with federal aid projects. From that point forward, we don't have anything programmed. We will continue to apply, and it is within our funding to have 1 project per year. So it's been good. The city has had multiple federal aid projects going back into the early 2000s. It's been a great program. So let's hope that continues. Okay, let me see. Yeah, I think we've hit all the main high points. So let's dive into the line item budget. Start with general fund. All the various revenues are listed. They start with just the various tax revenues. I am always very conservative, cautious in projecting revenues. Even having said that, some of our recent experience has caused me to even go a little farther than I typically would. So I have increased some of these revenue numbers a bit. I just felt like I had to because our experience was showing that we should reasonably anticipate more than what some of my preliminary numbers were. If you look down at the very bottom, utility taxes, I'm looking at 91605 electric. That's the gross receipts tax. That's the 3rd leg of the 3-legged stool. It's about 60 to 65% industrial use, about 35% residential. That's a big piece of our funding. When you think about economic development, you've got to do your best to work on all aspects. But industrial development is very important to the city. It creates jobs, creates property tax base, it creates tax revenues via these gross receipts taxes. Again, about 60 to 65% of that number comes from our industrial base. So very important. It's also very weather dependent. I mean, your industry not so heavily weather dependent, but still, I mean, your electric use over the, for the most part it really does depend on the weather. If you have cold winters, you see that reflected. We've had some mild springs. Last year in particular, I think it was kind of mild. So this number will kind of jump up and down a little bit. Into the general fund, we have various license tax, cigarette stamps, the merchant's licenses, business license, motor vehicle license. I don't know, Mayor, if we could get into discussion of that now or save it for later. This is the fee, or it's a tax, but that I propose that we eliminate.
We can, if you want to discuss it now, that's fine.
Okay. What is this, what is the motor vehicle license fee / tax? It is, it's $5 on every car, truck, and motorcycle in the city. It was first implemented, I think, in the 80s, maybe. I forget that. I don't have it right at my fingertips. When the city collected its own taxes, it was collected here, and it was used, at least to some degree, as a way to get people to pay their personal property taxes. The city also then issued city stickers, and the police went out and actually enforced. If you didn't have a city sticker on your vehicle, that was against the ordinance, and so we also enforced in that way. Obviously, all this was well before I was here. We stopped doing this at some point in the 1990s, that's my understanding, as far as issuing the city stickers. And then the tax and fee remained on the books when we contracted with Franklin County for our tax collection. It stayed on the books, and it's collected to this day. Why repeal it? One, we do impose a personal property tax on those same vehicles. Two, we do anticipate some increase in revenues via the increased Missouri gas tax. It was just implemented last year. We haven't really seen it reflected in our numbers yet because that first increase was, I think, 2.5 cents. So that would be another reason. And then 3, it's just frankly a way to cut a tax. And, people can have different opinions on that, but I am frankly always on the lookout for some area that could be cut. So,
Well, it might not be a bad thing, because we still haven't brought up, or have we, the taxing for the internet sales?
we have not, correct, yes.
So, if we eliminated this, to kind of compensate for something, a sales tax that we're going to implement, so might not be a bad thing to cancel this and let people know that we did that.
Can I add one thing to that? I guess to back up just a hair on taxes. So for the cable TV franchise, I assume that's like Spectrum. If you have AT&T or whatever, that's where those taxes come from.
Yes.
But if I just get internet and I stream my television, I thought I'd read that Baldwin or Manchester was working on a tax for those online streaming services. Is that something that we do currently, or we just don't get because they're...
I don't know the intimate details, but what I do know is that it's been a significant topic of discussion in the Missouri legislature.
That might have been where I read it.
Yes, and I think the city's general position, Missouri Municipal League, the cities say, look, the live stream is conducted over the same cables that are in the ground that supply phone, internet data, all that. They're in the city right of way, okay? And so they're subject to taxation. And I don't think there's a lot of argument about that, but obviously the live stream providers are pushing back. There was some effort in the legislature to address that, and to be honest, I'm not aware of any resolution this year. Will it continue to be in play? Again, it's really kind of in the legislature's hands.
That's not something we can do at a local level?
No. Mm-mm. Yeah, it would. Going way, way back, when cell phones first became very prevalent, there was a lot of there was a lot of litigation over that. And there's a series of settlements in which the big providers agree to pay the city tax, and that's been established. This, to me, seems like it's a kind of a replay of that. And, you know, again, the same concept. If this data is being delivered via the same pipes and wires, so to speak, that are in your right-of-way right now that are already being taxed, it's pretty simple, in my opinion. So.
So do you need anything from us for that motor vehicle thing?
Actually, no, not tonight. We don't. This budget shows it still in there, and the budget will continue to show it, I guess, unless there's some board action. If the board wants to move on this, we would suggest that we move sooner than later. The Franklin County handles all this, and we're not sure exactly when they would require notice from us, but if we were to act on it, we would like to give them notice before August.
Is there any way you could put a reminder on the next Board of Aldermen meeting for us to discuss it?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Then we have the full board. Obviously, citizens can come out and put their yay or nay. I would assume nobody would be against it. I guess you never really know, but I think it'd be a good reminder for us to start that discussion at the next Board of Aldermen meeting, unless somebody disagrees with that.
I agree.
I agree.
Very good. We will do that. Okay, building permits and codes. If you look back at 2020, and I know the budget only goes back that far, but even farther back, we've been generating a fair amount of revenue here. 134 in 2020, 163 in 2021, 130 through March 31st. There is absolutely an argument for us to raise our fees. I'm just being blunt about it. I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm just simply saying when you look at our fees compared to others, you know, I think rather clearly some of our fees are low. On the flip side of it, when you think of it in terms of funding your operations and some of the staffing, that number seems, you know, pretty about where it ought to be. You know, if we collect 175 in the next year, we will cover a good part of the building department staff just with that number. So I think we're in fair shape with that. Okay, moving on down, ARPA, just real quick, we did receive our first disbursement last August, which is this current fiscal year. We expect to receive the next one this August, I should say, and so we are budgeting for that. Then we get into court or fines and forfeitures, which frankly I don't get involved in really at all. There are various revenues that come in. They're, again, kind of outside my purview, so I don't really, I don't get involved in this. Then we have a number of different miscellaneous revenues. One thing of note, I think the school resource officer reimbursement, there was a new agreement that the city entered into earlier this year, maybe late last year. And so we do anticipate a bigger share of that in the new fiscal year. Okay, finally then down into transfers. The Prop P money hits the Prop P account and then it is transferred into general fund to pay for law enforcement officer compensation. And then we also have what we call a pilot transfer from water and sewer. That's essentially our own gross receipts tax imposed upon our water and sewer operations. And so that is intended to cover a lot of the kind of the carrying costs of the administrative side of the water and sewer. moving down into reserves and balances, we are anticipating starting the year with 1.5 million in general fund, which includes the ARPA money. And then when you combine that with all the other anticipated revenues, we look to receive about 6.7 million in the next fiscal year, or have available to us, I should say. We have many different restricted accounts. These are targeted, earmarked for very specific purposes, and so we can't use these monies for anything but what is listed there. And then continuing on down, there's a summary of our revenues by category. The various different taxes we receive, 3.485 million. Licenses charged for services, intergovernmental, which is essentially that ARPA money. Transfers, so forth. So that's a picture of our revenues, general fund. Any questions on that? Okay, moving on. I just want to hit the high points here. If there's any individual questions, of course, we can take them. We split general fund into many what we call departments. There's a legislative department, administrative, so forth. We did increase professional improvement in the legislative budget this year. We anticipate that the board will be going to various trainings, conferences, seminars, which I think is a good thing. We do need additional budget, so we have increased that. There will be some travel expenses. Those are expected to be somewhat minimal. Honestly, that could reasonably be raised a bit, that $250 number, but maybe 500 would be the most.
Do we use city vehicles as often as possible for those?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If you do use your own vehicle on city business, such as a city conference, that is like a business-related conference, then you can be reimbursed. Franklin County Municipal League dinners, no. Those would not be reimbursed.
Sure.
Administration. Again, we just got various operating expenditures. We have some professional improvement. We do go to a few conferences, but really not many. I go to one or two. Kim goes to one or two. That's about the extent of it. In the general admin lines, the city attorney budget is there. We also want to split out the prosecuting attorney budget. We haven't done that in the past. We've all lumped it into just the one line. I think it'd be helpful to see what the court prosecutor is separated. We do have we bought that Cherokee a couple years ago. That's what that 5626 is. That's the debt service on that Cherokee. Police. I budget in more kind of lump sum figures, and I know Kim, through her accounting, will split some of these numbers out. The bottom line, I think, is worth note here. Our total personnel budget for this fiscal year is $2.6 million. And if you look at where we were budgeted just a year ago, 2.24. What's happened? We are now fully staffed by budget. We're not fully staffed with people, but we are budgeted for 20 officers, which is an increase of 1 over last year. That was in the last wage and salary increase ordinance. We have 6 full-time dispatchers, and we have obviously all the different pension payments and so forth. So that is an aggressive budget, and I think it's needed, but it does have impact on other items that we can see later. These various line item expenditures, these have been gone through in some detail with Chief and his staff. We think these numbers are all pretty reasonable. We budget our expenditures on the high side revenues in the low. So for the most part, we give ourselves a bit of cushion. There's a lot of things within all departments across the city that we've been sort of reviewing and fine-tuning. I know a lot of our IT expenditures, for example, we're really kind of honing in on those, getting a better handle on them. So for the most part, I think our operating expenditures are pretty modest.
So I have a question about the prisoner expenses and the prisoner expenses for medical. Are they considered a prisoner pretty much the second they're taken into custody and put in a car? I'm just thinking because we don't, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, we don't keep prisoners here like we used to in a holding cell.
A lot of those expenses are fit for confinements, and we have to suffer those no matter where we take them. So those are pre-confinement medicals.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving down into capital expenditures for police. We have various equipment expenditures. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a bit of a blank. I know there's some vests in there. I know that there's some evidence management equipment in that number. We do have some new purchases in the weapons category, rifles, so forth. Vehicles, this is one area where we really need to keep up. That $123,000 figure covers three vehicles. Had a conversation last week with Chief and Don, Major Locke. Can we go with 2? They both suggest rather strongly we need to stay with 3.
Is that including the 2 that are on order?
No.
Okay. So that's 5, because there's 2 outstanding, I think, right?
No, we received those.
Oh, okay.
Those are in the fleet.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, right now we have not ordered any vehicles. Honestly, if we get budget authority for those 3, we'd probably be going for the Explorers. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we would hope to get Durangos. So if I could just say, you remember a few years back, you had to buy 6 vehicles in 1 year. What I'm trying to do is cut that down to 2 vehicles a year, but we're playing a little bit of catch-up. So what I'd like to do is even that out and make it more consistent. We're doing that in a lot of the areas here where we played catch-up in years past, and we're trying to just even that budget out. So we do have a little bit of belt tightening at first, but we hope that over the years to come, those will be more consistent and easier to budget for.
So how long does the average police car last in service? Is there a...
Boy.
4 to 5 years at that.
Yeah, so, just, the ones in patrol last time, the ones in administration, that kind of thing. So we have several vehicles that are well over 100,000 or will be by the end of the budget year. So that's what we're trying to do. Actually, after a car gets to be about 6 years old, a lot of the safety features, they're kind of null and void. They don't really apply in a pursuit-rated vehicle. So we have those kind of timing, even though it might be a car with lower mileage, we try to even that out. But as they get up in years, they can be a detriment just by the age on the vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
And remember, when we replace a vehicle, we sell the vehicle. So that was something, we had a couple vehicles on the lot that we sold off this year. So we're trying to be good stewards of that side of it as well.
Okay, thank you.
So with that in mind, is there anywhere on the revenue side for what a potential profit we would make off of those 3? So if we're budgeting $123,000 for 3 vehicles, but we may make, I don't know,
There is
$5,000 off of the ones that they're going to replace, is that $5,000 anywhere in the revenue? Just curious.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And in fact, it's 5,000 exactly.
Wow.
I have done my homework.
And I'll admit to being a little, I am a little dubious when it comes to certain revenues. So, I mean, Major might be able to tell me a little bit better what he would anticipate. I think 5 would be a minimum. That's kind of why I budget for that. Reasonably, what do you think, Major? We probably would realize maybe even 8 to 10, possibly.
Per car?
Okay,
Per car or total?
total.
Oh,
Total, yeah. Car market's gone up, but it's a used police vehicle.
Yeah, this is like a little example of how I budget. I'm just not going to get too excited about our potential revenues, but there is a number in the budget. Okay, moving down to one of the major expenditures in this year's budget, radar equipment upgrades. Chief has done a lot of work in this area, along with his team. I know about it. I understand, of course, in the big picture what we're going for here, but Chief, would you bring us up to speed a bit?
So what's happening is currently the police department's using a radio system that's been around since the 50s. And we're being what we would call narrow banded out. In addition to that, we live in a radio isolation world. We can't really communicate with many of the agencies around us. I don't know if you've heard, we asked for the helicopter. We can have the helicopter anytime from St. Louis County, or, that's a shared helicopter, but we can have it. But they weren't going to come because they do not have direct radio communication with our units on the ground because of our radio system being from the 50s. So the other side of that is we're being narrow banded out, which means there's so much competition in the airwaves that our old analog radios just don't have the punch they used to in the air. And we're constantly working on them. We're working on towers. We're just having really poor reception. Many times the radios don't work inside of buildings and things like that. So the newest, best system is a digital system. It's encrypted, and we've been looking at that. We studied the two different systems. There's Mosewind and there's Slater. The coverage for Mosewind was sketchy at best, even though Washington went with that, but they had to build a tower at quite an expense, and we would have to do the same thing. If we go on the existing Slater system, we make use of 3 different towers in 3 different counties, and it would get us on the system at minimal cost. It would also use our existing fiber optic feed and some other things. It's our best shot at getting up to the 21st century with an encrypted digital system. This system would include replacing all the portable radios, all the mobile radios, both dispatch centers and some of the other infrastructure. And it would also include some radios for public works so that they could be up into this realm of technology. So it's a big lift. A lot of agencies have to do this. And I won't even talk about the history of where this could have been alleviated years back, but it's something that we're going to have to do. I feel like in the next 10 years, that they're going to make us come out of what they call in the clear. When we talk over the radio, everybody in town can listen to us, and it's broadcast over the internet. So this will give us a little bit more privacy for our citizens. Everybody doesn't know everybody's business by listening to the radio. But I feel like all the indicators point that the federal government or other entities will make us encrypt in a few years anyway. And this is the time is right with this ARPA funds. We've been able to work with the people from Motorola and bring the original proposals just were astronomical, and we've been able to cut those 40% just by fine tooth comb over the expenses. St. Louis County is going to give us some equipment to get us started on it for free that they're not using, so that's going to help keep costs down. So as Mr. Ross said, we've done quite a bit of work on it. We think this is the best thing for the city and the best thing for the city moving forward.
You mentioned the Washington, for example. So when I was reading through that, because they're not on the same system, are we not going to have the same?
No, we will have complete interoperability with them. Our radios will be able to talk to them. Their radios will be able to talk to us. Those are all on a digital system. there's so many channels, they have built-in interoperability channels in this equipment we're buying. So yes, we'll be able to talk to them, they'll be able to talk to us. We can't do that now. We can't talk to Eureka, we can't listen to Eureka. Franklin County will buy dual band radios. We won't lose any connectivity with Franklin County as well, and it'll increase our range. Right now, our radios don't work in the hospital in Washington. They don't work at the jail in Union. The new radios will work in both those areas. They'll work far to the west and far to the east and south. Jefferson County is on this system. St. Charles County is on this system, and we'll be sharing towers in both those counties as well.
And does our fire district and ambulance, or they have the
They're on that
capability?
system as well. Yes, they're on that same system. And and in fact, I talked to Chief Staghorn just yesterday about it, and he was I talked to him on, what is it? I don't even know what today is. It's on Friday. Maybe I talked to him on Sunday. I don't remember. But I talked to him about it. He's ecstatic about the fact that we'll be able to have that ability to talk to them on scenes and things like that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, that's basically it for the police department. Court, obviously, we have a court administrator, and we run our municipal court here as part of the circuit court, and so we have certain personnel and operating expenditures. Animal control, we have moved that under the auspices of the police department, and so there will be zero budget for animal control I should say, a carve-out budget. We still provide animal control, but it's all housed under the police department. Let's see, building maintenance. This has been something of a challenge. You can see it in our numbers. We spent $77,000 in fiscal year '21. We had an HVAC system here that had been installed. It was getting close to its 10-year anniversary, and we had repeated issues with it. A lot of expense, unfortunately. We've still seen some of those costs in this fiscal year. However, it appears that the systems are working more effectively now. I am being a bit optimistic, I have to say, in reducing this year's budget to $35,000. We do have some service calls on occasion, but we have not had any big equipment expenses over the last several months. So I hope that we've got a handle on that now.
Is there anything else with City Hall, like the parking lot or striping of the lot, like those kind of things? Are those anticipated in here, or is that not something?
No. They were considered, but we removed those for budget reasons.
It just seems that it's been this way for a little bit now, and I don't know how much it really matters. It just probably is more of it really looks nice that we have all the properly painted lines at City Hall and all that, but is that expensive to stripe?
No, not really. I mean, if all you're doing is sealing and striping, we could probably do that. Just throw a number out, maybe $20,000. We haven't analyzed it very thoroughly, but it may be that we need to do more than that. If the board wants us to, investigate that more thoroughly and bring back budget numbers, we can do that. I know it's a need, don't get me wrong. We've been a little bit reticent of directing funds toward that purpose because we got so many other needs. But it could be a good use of ARPA money, honestly.
Do we have the ability to stripe ourselves?
Yes, Robert's not here. Yes, we can. If we're going to, I would prefer that we contract it and bundle it with other pavement markings in other areas.
Is it that we don't have the right equipment, or is it staffing?
Yeah, it's more of an equipment issue. We don't have the best equipment to do it. If you're talking about striping an entire parking lot, I mean, we can do it, but again, if you're going to go with the expense of doing the resurfacing and everything that is necessary for that, I would rather us stripe it professionally.
And maybe this is a bigger discussion with Robert and obviously for another time, but it just seems like we have, with the size of our city, a lot of striping needs, like whether you take our entire downtown that lacks a lot of proper striping and all that, whether it's the roadways. Is that something maybe we need to have a discussion about having the right equipment to start to take that on ourselves?
Sure, it's unfortunate Robert's not here. He could obviously chime in better on that. Yes, I mean, I'd be happy to have that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. Code Enforcement, Department 42, we are also zeroing that out this year and folding it into the Community Development Department, which is the next Department 45. This is what previously we called planning. And so we put all the various community development department salaries, not all of them, but portions of them in this budget. And then we have certain itemized expenditures, operating expenditures essentially. We did reserve $20,000 for building abatement. If we were to have to do some nuisance abatement in which the city actually enters property to abate certain nuisances, it's going to cost money. And so we did give ourselves $20,000 budget there. I think it's helpful that we have that.
Have we never budgeted for before, or has it shown up elsewhere?
We have, and
Okay.
I think it's probably within the code enforcement.
Section above, I think.
Yes, correct.
20400.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
When we get into contractual expenditures, we're reserving a little bit of funding for a planning consultant. On occasion, we do have a need there. So not a big need, but it would be helpful to have at least a little budget. Next site, that is a 3-year contract. We will be in year 2 this year. We're just getting that program off the ground. And Mr. Myers, I would expect, would have some information for the board at some point in the next couple of months over what some of those findings are. MyGov is our building department software. That is, a must-have, of course, maintenance support contract. Rebranding and logo, this was a suggestion from a variety of sources, not just community development. And that is one that is, I think, on the table, frankly. And then professional services. What is that? That is consulting services to revamp sections of our zoning code. I would also suggest that be reduced. We have some needs, but I think we can be a little bit more targeted and probably address some of our most critical needs this year at less cost. And then continuing on to the bottom here, 2 different capital expenditures, computer IT. Primarily, there's 2 items in that number. No, let me back up. There's just the one. It's a large format printer scanner. This is a real need. There's no question we need this. We have no way of, let me back up. We do. We have an old copier that can make copies of the large format prints. We have no way to scan those. That unit is many years old. I'm guessing it's minimum 15 years old, probably older. It's not supported. And so this, in my opinion, is kind of a priority need. We really, really need to be able to scan these big, construction plan sets, scan them, archive them, make them available both to staff as well as the public if necessary. Subdivision plats. And we just don't have these things available to us. And so this is an item that I feel pretty strongly about.
So you're talking about large, like full-size blueprints and stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that would be a purchase of the equipment. It wouldn't. I'm assuming for that
Correct. We would-
18,000. Okay.
Yeah, we would buy it. There are lease options out there. I've not seen a good lease deal yet, to be honest. They always seem to come up with some inflated costs. So we do think that's important. And then finally, West St. Louis Street banner. This is something that was authorized by the Board of Aldermen previously. What are we talking about? We're talking about maybe I can just yield this, Steve, if you want to descuss this, describe it.
It's been the source of a lot of discussion at chamber levels,
You
chamber
might-
of commerce.
You might come up here to the,
Sorry about that. So the Chamber of Commerce Pacific Partnership, as well as ourselves, we've talked for quite a long time about the possibility of getting a banner similar to what you could see at downtown Eureka that spans over St. Louis Street here, their Main Street there. It's two 20-foot poles that would support a banner that would stretch over the street that promote events coming to town or, whatever we want to promote in Pacific. It'd be a changeable banner system to where you order the banner. Our bucket truck that our street crews have already could change it very easily. It would be a program that would be run by the chamber. We would pay the cost. It's a partnership. We would pay the cost of actually assembling the poles or mounting them into the street right there at the intersection of what is would be 2nd Street and St. Louis. So we're looking at the old bank, the new post office at that corner, and then coming across to the vacant property that is right next to Chuck Maurer and next to Sarah Summers. That would be where the posts span. It's about a 50-foot span. So I've gotten numbers in that I believe the $20,000 is going to cover it completely. And that's two 8-inch square post columns that are 1/4-inch steel engineered by a company that has bid this. And it would be a flat mounted on a poured pier. And then you have two steel cables that stretch between them that would be able to be clipped and then ratcheted back to the posts to secure it. So that's what we're talking about.
I thought that we had the poles already
Well,
a year or two ago.
those poles were not engineered, and that was the tripping point on those. Because we didn't have engineering, we wouldn't be able to use it. That was something that was stopped pretty much in its tracks by Cochrane Engineering. So these poles will be engineered.
All right, thank
That's
you.
what stopped that. Any questions?
Do you have any images of those?
We
What
do
they would
have.
look like in the street?
Sure, absolutely. Be happy to send it to you.
I'd be interested in seeing that.
Yeah, I'll be happy to send them to you.
Is that a high traffic area?
It is,
Okay.
very much so. That was, part of the discussions was, could we do it on 66? Well, no, because MoDOT won't allow it. Could we do it over First Street? No, because that's a MoDOT-controlled highway. We can do it at St. Louis Street, though, because that is a city-owned, or city purview.
And hopefully a new post office will bring more traffic too.
Absolutely. Okay,
And I'm
thanks.
assuming those banners would be up high enough that if an 18-wheeler happened to go down?
Yeah, 16-foot clearance.
Okay,
Okay?
perfect.
okay, moving on, we're getting to the bottom line in general fund that I want to focus on a little bit. But first, we have cemetery. We do, of course, operate 2 cemeteries. Grass cutting is the biggest expense. We also have, of course, a sexton and some other miscellaneous and supplies required. We do continue to have $4,000 in the budget for professional services. We started down a path to get our cemeteries mapped. We really hit a snag. I did include that again. If we can get time is the most valuable resource we have, frankly. To focus on that, it would be nice to get that to the finish line. Continuing, Merrimack Valley Historical Society, we have not budgeted anything there. That has really been folded into the tourism budgets, essentially. Yeah, actually, let me back up. As far as the specific items of spending there, we really would, they do have some money that was brought to the city when they first incorporated within the city. And so I just haven't been able to budget that. There hasn't been a meeting here in a couple months. Okay, and then general government, this is kind of the catch-all. We have a lot of different things that we do. Bulk trash pickup, for example. All of our IT expenditures for City Hall, newsletter. One of these years, not this one, I'm going to suggest that we outsource our newsletter. I just don't think we're there yet. We could, the budgets can be amended, but at least for where we're at now, I think we'll just continue with the newsletter as we've done it. That city collector fee is what we pay Franklin County to collect our taxes. Payroll processing, we use ADP for that, and so we have some expense there. Senior Center contract, the board, I think last year, entered into a new agreement with Senior Center, so we pay them, I think, semi-annually or maybe quarterly. Kim, is it 2 payments or a quarter? Yeah, 2 payments. In return, they serve as our emergency shelter and do other things, of course, within their operation. Warning sirens, we have, we've been doing some work in this capacity. We have, our sirens are, for the most part, up to speed. We have, we've been focusing a little bit more closely, and we've noticed a few things that need some upkeep, so we do need some budget to keep those operating.
I know it's not a huge expense and aspect, but could ARPA funds help with that, or not so much?
Yes, I mean, pretty much anything is eligible, but we would really kind of shy away from those smaller expenditures. That tech website, you'll notice we spent $44,000 so far this year. What that was is that Conference Technologies AV setup. We made a down payment when we ordered that, so that's why that number looks so big.
In that budget for this year, does that include, I think there was some mention of updating the website or creating a new, or maybe that was the accounting software that I saw.
Yes.
Is that 60,000 back there on 205?
No. Let me think. Aha. Where did it go? Oh, it's in the IT right there, capital. Just a few lines down. Get to that in just a moment. We have electricity, phone bills, of course. We have, especially in the police side, we've really reduced our phone bills over the past few years. We have the annual audit. We have some engineering budget. This is really minor. General consulting needs. Some of it relates to plan reviews, those types of things. Codification. We have some ongoing expenditures there. Grass mowing, that's a big number, and I would like to bring attention to that. We have 40-some flood buyout lots. We did contract this year to have those lots cut. That 30 grand is a number that would carry us through June 30 of next year. But we can't. We have to do something different, in my opinion.
Well, we're required to maintain it as a green space, but it doesn't have to be cut. It can be turned back into natural vegetation.
Yes. This has been a subject of conversation at various points in the past. At some point, we just got to get a plan together for how we're going to address this. There are certain of those floodplain lots that you could just put in trees and be done.
Right.
There are others where, prairie grass is, I have some experience with that. It can be a really good, nice solution for that. There are even some that you potentially could lease two adjacent properties, as long as they just keep it in some sort of vegetation, gardens and such. No structures, but just, it does require some type of planning effort. But to just cut these lots forever and ever and ever makes no sense, obviously. So,
If there are a fair amount of lots that we would have to cut, that those solutions you talked about, is it something our Public Works could do? Do they currently mow it? Or I'm assuming that we're contracting for that.
they, in the latest 2 or 3 rounds, we've bought 26 properties in the last 2.5 years, round figures. And so previous to that, Public Works was cutting them, yes. In the new, because we had so many of them, we contracted for it. Public Works is stretched thin. It's a fact. Could they work it in? Maybe. When it comes to the park, because the contractor also cuts sections of the park, and Mayor knows this from her experience in the park board, we've had discussions at various times about, wow, we're getting really close to where it seems like it might pay us to just hire somebody to take this on. We did decide this is not the year for that. But, hopefully if our financial situation continues to be on the upswing, maybe next year would be the year.
Okay.
You said, just a minute ago, you said that we bought 30, or 26 or 27 lots. Could you just explain for the new folks how we bought those, so they don't think it comes out of general fund?
Sure, yeah, they're all FEMA flood buyout lots. The city did contribute some percentage. It varies. It gets kind of technical, but there was 3 different rounds. We have another round. Of course, the board just passed a resolution last week that speaks to this. So, the city funding piece was pretty minimal. It's the maintenance, when you take it on and you say it's open space in perpetuity, okay, it's yours in perpetuity. There's nothing you can really do with it. And there's going to be no question, there'll probably be some of these little smaller lots that we probably will have to mow. But there's bigger pieces, especially as you get closer down to like the lift station and nearer to the river. Some of those bigger chunks, we could just reforest that. Okay. Capital expenditures, we're on page 35. 75,000, that's where that accounting software upgrade is. It's the only capital expenditure that we're proposing in general fund for general admin, and it's also, in our opinion, very important. What are we proposing to do? We're proposing to implement a new accounting and utility billing software. This will, in my opinion, greatly improve both sides, both accounting. Our accounting is okay. It's fine. We work hard at it, but it is also frustrating, especially the budget management. Chief, any of the department heads, they just don't have access in real time to our budgets. So we can certainly improve on that side. The utility billing side is really where I think we need to improve. In today's age, you ought to be able to pay your bill with a click on your phone. You should be able to get your bills delivered by email, by text if you wish. And our current software just doesn't have that capability. And so, I've taken these types of comments quite frequently, frankly, over the years. And, people, they learn to live with it. Okay, I'll use my own bank account. I don't think it's a critical need, but yes, I think this is the year.
And does that accounting software, will that be able to integrate with our utility billing and enable that, or would that be some more additional software that we'd have to?
No, it would be all inclusive. So we would house accounting, budgeting, utility billing all under one software. Yes.
And if you would, what's that 60,000 software back on 206?
Those are our contracted IT provider. It's 3,000. I think it's 3250 a month for their,
The software that runs on the,
yeah, just their support. And then I honestly thought about reducing that number because we've done a lot of equipment and hardware buys, but I also know that it just seems like we keep getting hit with new things. So I kept it at 60. Again, just the support alone is going to be around 40. So we're really only giving ourselves about 20 grand for equipment expenses. We've been in this kind of IT program for a while now. This contract dates, I think, to 2019, I think. Before then, we really didn't have any sort of managed IT. And we had a real need to upgrade our equipment just across the board. And so we've done that. But, we still have needs.
On the water billing and stuff like that, was there a requirement, or is there anything in the budget for different meters and things like that? Or am I getting things mixed together?
Good question. There is in the water budget, I think I kept it in there. We also have a need to upgrade our meters, okay? And about half of our meters are up to the current standard and about half need to be replaced. That, however, you don't have to do them both at the same time. You can implement this software and then set yourself up for the water meter replacement program, which could come afterward. Now, I don't know if you're looking into it's been in and out of the budget, because I've been a little bit on the fence myself whether this is the year to attack it. It is, okay. If you look at page 58, in the capital expenditures line 430-20, there's 500,000 in for water meters. Robert's not here. I have real doubts whether we'll really be able to get to it this year. I'm just being upfront about it. It's a significant program.
And that's where they don't have to go out and read the meters anymore either, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. What I might suggest, it's in the budget. We are supplementing. The budget will balance with the ARPA money. We might just leave it in there. Honestly, with Robert out, I think this is a conversation for a better day, or a different day.
It's fine. Wasn't trying to
No.
jump us ahead to 58 either.
No, and I feel very strongly this is something that we need to do at some point. My concern really is when you've got the major water project that major wastewater project that we're talking about doing this year, and then we are going to chase after a stormwater grant with ARPA funds, and then you try to introduce a major water meter replacement program in the same year. I just really wonder if we can manage all that. Having said that, I think we should leave it in the budget and wait until Robert's here so we can discuss it more thoroughly.
Is that something you could contract out and have done separate from the Public Works Department?
Yes, but it's still going to require a lot of coordination.
Is it more bandwidth at City Hall than it is the ability to install them?
It requires City Hall and Public Works both kind of work alongside the contractor. I mean, not physically in the buildings, but kind of implementing the program, the notices and all that. I mean, in theory, you could contract it all out, but I mean, the way I've discussed it with vendors in the past is, the city and the contractor essentially work together to to implement it. We have talked to one vendor, and there is another one I know that does the same work, and I've not been able to speak to them yet. So assuming it stays in the budget, we can continue to have those conversations.
Okay.
Okay, back to page 36, getting very close to the end of the general fund budget, and let's see, that equipment lease is still in the general fund. What that is, I'm sorry, I am drawing a blank on that one. I know that goes back to the First State Community Bank Finance piece. Oh, it's a building department truck. Sorry, I think that's what that is. Okay, then we go into transfers out. We transfer to contingency. This fiscal year, we've transferred $15,000 per year. I am proposing that we reduce that to 10.
Per month,
Yes.
not per year.
Right, I'm sorry. Transfer to transportation. This is 60,000, which is a lot less than we've been doing. That's a good thing. Mayor Philly was here most of last week, and we went over various aspects of the budget, and we reduced some transportation expenditures and got that general fund transfer number down to 60,000. That's good, and I think if we can continue to do that, that's where we should be. We then transfer 10,000 per month into parks and stormwater, and then the ARPA money, well, 250 is proposed to transfer out to parks for ARPA purposes. And then at this point, we're keeping that $500,000 expenditure in water without any ARPA money supporting it, which I think is the right way to approach it, but maybe we can talk about that later too. And then finally, transfer to tourism. In order to operate Red Cedar, we have to have general fund. There's no other way to do it, or contingency, I suppose. But so we are proposing to transfer 160 out of general fund to tourism in year one. Mayor and I have talked about this. This cannot be an ongoing expenditure. We're going to have to reduce this transfer, ideally down to nothing. And how quick we can get there kind of remains to be seen. But, that the Red Cedar is going to have to support itself using tourism funds and other revenues. And the general fund transfer is just going to have to be reduced. Okay, so bottom line, the bottom line is actually on the very next page. When you compile all of our revenues versus our expenditures, you come to an operating balance or a deficit of 570,000. When you remove the ARPA money, it's 450. However, when you include all the anticipated ARPA revenues in our beginning balances, we show a positive total balance of 929, sorry. So, general fund deficits. In my opinion, we have to reduce. Can't have a deficit this big. There's a variety of ways to attack it. I think we've got to reduce some of our capital expenditures. We could potentially look at certain transfers. I don't really know what the board's appetite is. It is very typical that we have deficits on paper. And we've done it frequently, honestly. But a deficit of this size is just, we've got to address it, in my opinion. I'd like to get it down at least into, say, maybe the 200s. So, any comments, concerns,
Even with
questions?
200,000, that 200,000 would be coming out of the general fund, right? That deficit over the year.
Right. Basically, what we're doing is eating into our reserves.
Be coming out of the reserve, the contingency?
Yes. Well, eating into our general fund reserves, not contingency.
Okay.
Yes.
How much is that? Is that a amount we start the year off with, or is that an amount that we build up through the year?
Contingency?
The general fund reserve.
Okay, general fund reserves, that number just floats. It just depends on cash flow. We are projecting to start the year with ARPA money. We're expecting to start the year with 1.5 million in general fund reserves. And so that's why you have a bottom line number of 929. You start the year with a lot of cash in reserve. However, through the year as budgeted, if you budget and you spend every single penny that you budgeted here, we're going to be eating into those reserves rather significantly.
Okay, so yeah, so none of that touches the contingency reserve.
Right.
Do you have any recommendations for, no one else has questions?
I do.
Do you have
say,
any
if we-
recommendations for how to pull that down? You
I
mentioned a few
do.
as we
I-
went along.
If we go
I-
back to page 20, that's where the capital expenditures, those 20 and 21 are probably the 2 pages for us to look at and discuss.
Yeah, and I hate to be the budget cutter, but I need to be.
Sharpen your axe.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, and it has to be done.
So ideally, we're looking to reduce it, let's say 250,000. We're looking for 250,000, roughly,
Yeah,
300.
Yeah, I would say 200 would probably be
200,
okay.
okay.
Water meter replacement program.
The rebranding logo, I think you had mentioned, can easily go away for now.
Correct.
When we
I
talked
would
earlier.
remove that.
Who's keeping track?
I got it.
I would also reduce the zoning land subdivision code updates. I would reduce that to 10, at least to start.
All right, that's 60,000.
Right.
What page are you on?
Page 20?
20.
Top zoning land subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
That was a $50,000 item, right? No, that was the rebranding.
Actually, I'm sorry, that's 70,000, not 60. Maybe I shouldn't be the one keeping track.
Yeah, I know. From here, it gets tough. I mean, that printer scanner replacement, that is also in the community development department. Can that wait? Yes, although we are working on kind of an antiquated machine over there.
Are we looking at possibly getting that large format printer scanner and the printer scanner replacement from the same?
Probably.
To where we
Yes.
might be able to, if we buy, what I'm gonna call bulk buy, that they'll give us reduced rates?
Possibly, yes. Mm-hmm.
Might be something to look into, even if it's, because we've got budgeted 20, yeah, now I'm doing math right, 26,000. Let's say if we could get both for 20,000, there's $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
I won't count that, but I think that's something we could look at.
On the top of 21, there's 2 line items on the tennis courts, both 150, 55. Is there's difference between the two? What is it?
There are, the tennis, the ADA improvements would be 50 grand, and then,
Yeah, so it's
The
the
first
50,
line item's ADA.
yeah, so that $50,000
Yes,
is
right.
ADA accessibility for the city park, the ball fields, the north restroom, the dog park, and the tennis court.
Oh, yeah,
And then you've got tennis court repair for 55,000.
okay.
the only thing here that hits general fund is administration and police. So some of these other items would hit other funds. And it just kind of shows you the difficulty we have. If you're trying to cut 200 and some, it's it's hard to do. It really is.
Well, the dog park, I mean, we were talking $35,000 between the dog park features for small and large dogs. Right, it was $35,000.
Right, but again, that's a park expense.
Doesn't come out of the general fund.
Doesn't come out of the
Oh,
general
no,
fund.
okay.
Well, Steve, would it lower our transfer to parks?
It could, yes. No, good point. That is a good point. We're only transferring 120 into parks, and the rationale for that, the board should understand. When the voters approved Prop P, Parks and Storm, the city was funding parks to some number, right? And so we've continued to fund parks at some number, and right now it's 120 per year. And then the Parks and Storm money is in addition to that. Now, the Parks and Storm money is also split 50-50 between Parks and Storm. So could we reduce the Parks transfer? Yes. Should we? I would be wary of doing that myself. The only way you can really, let me back up. There's something else that we discussed. Prop P. Prop P right now has $104,000 in reserve. When the board approved the wage and salary increase back in December of '21, we did increase the staffing level to 20 officers from 19. We did transfer some funds then. We did. But those funds were earmarked primarily for the pay increases because we had also boosted police pay rather significantly. If we're going to go forward with this budget at that staffing level, then we ought to use that Prop P reserve as supplement to the general fund. And so that would be one of my recommendations is to transfer $100,000 out of that into general fund in an effort to reduce this year's deficit.
So in essence, that would be taking the 172 for the police down to 72,000. To transfer 100,000 from Prop P basically to cover the requests of the police.
Right. It would have to be directed at compensation.
Okay, it would have to be directed to compensation. Okay,
Right. But it,
that could offset then.
it does offset, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely would make that recommendation. It would have to be done via ordinance or resolution, but I think it's one way to supplement general fund going into this fiscal year and sort of trim that deficit down a bit.
So then if you take rebranding and that $100,000, does that put us at 150 or is that rebranding not a part of the general?
That puts us down to about 300.
That'll take one, if we do the rebranding, take the zoning down to 10,000 and do the transfer from the Prop P over, that's 170,000.
So we're almost at what?
And we
The
start with
200,000 that was
5.
asked for. What are other cost-cutting measures that you would recommend, Mr. Roth? Smaller police cars?
I did float the idea of reducing a police car. I know,
I don't think we should do
and nor do I. We could reduce the contingency transfer. I'm honestly not a fan of that. Why? Because in another part of the budget, we are proposing to use $250 in contingency for transportation, which essentially is cash flow for the major federal projects. So if we weren't transferring any contingency out, there'd be a good argument to say, wait, stop, let's just hold this year. When you're transferring out, I think you ought to be transferring back in as well.
Mm-hmm.
In this budget, our transfer is 10, right, per month?
Yes.
Is there even any thought around just reducing the 10? Reducing it down to 5 or
I
7,500?
mean, yeah, we could.
I think the scary part is, you just said we're pulling 250 out of there, right? Or we potentially will be. And it takes us 2 years to put it back at what we're depositing now.
So if we even take that half, then you're doubling it,
Right.
potentially 4 years to put it back?
And I know Steve and I had a pretty long conversation this morning about contingency and kind of what like where do you cap it? Like you don't want to put $10 million in there or whatever. And I think we were in agreement that we're very close to that mark. That 1.8 to 2 million is about where we want to sit on a regular basis. It would really, I know at least I would be concerned if we're taking chunks and then it's taking us forever to put it back. I know in the past I've recommended when we have pulled out that I think we doubled our transfer for a while to get it put back up to where it needed to be. I think 2 years is too long to put it back at the mark it was at when we pull money out of it personally. I just think there's so many scary scenarios, like when we had the thing down on Osage,
The sinkhole?
the sinkhole or whatever, right? Like those kind of things. Or a year or two ago, we had a scare where we thought we were going to have to fork out a lot of the FEMA buyouts because of some weird rule change, you know, and that fund can get very small very quickly with just a few either mistakes or
$1 billion goes pretty quick.
right, you know, or not even our mistake, but things that just happen. I wouldn't want to reduce that any further than 10. I'm honestly not very comfortable with 10, but I think we're in a good spot being over 1.8. So I guess I don't know what anybody else has to say on it, but that concerns me. I think our savings account, general fund, I think we should do as little to play with that as humanly possible on a regular basis. I think we should talk at some point about what exactly is the max and how do we start to move that. And if we decide that max is X number, then absolutely, I think we should have the conversations to, you know, how do we can't just keep saving, we got to spend too, so.
I don't know, personally, a contingency fund, as far as I'm concerned, can grow to it equals our yearly budget, personally.
Right. Then you can survive a year
Yeah, I mean,
with
it's-
nothing. You
so
could
that-
have major
I mean, that's what
depression and
it's-
still survive.
Then you have a true, you know, I mean, it's there to, as a good buffer. I mean, we don't want to get rid of it. I mean, obviously. And we want it to continue to grow, because if you don't allow it to continue to grow, then as the economy and expenses grow, then pretty soon it's nothing.
Right.
Well, there's a percent, I think Steve was saying, what'd you say, the average is 30 to 40% of what'd you say, 30, you want your contingency to be 30 to 40% of, I don't remember exactly how you worded that.
Yeah, I mean, there's differing opinions on your perfect fund balance targets. I've always gone with the general rule of thumb, minimum 30%. And again, if you think of 5 million as expenditures, 30% of that, you're at, I think, 16.6, 1.667 million. 1.8, I mean, Alderman Nemeth asked me today, what's your number? And I told him 1.8, which is right where we're at. I would not want to go any lower. You know, I do think at some point, if your balances start to get to some certain number, and it's a kind of a political question more than administrative, you know, people are going to say, you know, why are you collecting all these taxes and just holding them? But again, that's really more of a political question than a budget question.
Right. Then again, they say when something goes wrong and you don't have the money to at least make payments on a loan to fix it, you know, because really 1.8 million for a big project is, you know, something goes wrong with our lagoon system, something goes wrong with our water or sewer, you know, and that's over and beyond what we have in reserves for them. You know, and then people want to know why we didn't plan for it.
I just think it's, either way, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like you either don't have enough or you got too much.
Exactly.
But I think the thing that I always put it at is if we're just constantly filling savings and we're not out doing the projects potentially that we could pull off by not putting in 200,000 a year at some point or whatever those numbers are, you know, are we really spending the appropriate amount of money to do upkeep on the city? It's like if I just keep making my house payment and I never do anything and I just keep saving all this money but I never maintain my house. Like there's a very fine balance, and I agree with you. I don't think it's 5 million that we should have. Maybe it is in years and years and years to come or whatever, right? I feel good at 1.8. I might feel better at 2 or a little bit more, maybe 2.5, but I think we have great finances. We're exceptionally creditworthy. If there was a big, huge thing that we couldn't afford, from what we've seen in the past, we're able to get what we need, even if we have to make a payment on it. You know,
I think our debt's high enough. I mean, I hear you.
no, I'm not saying that we should do that, but I'm saying
Man,
I think
that number scares the crap out of me.
I don't disagree. I mean, I'd prefer to run on zero debt, but
Of course.
but I think there's a fine balance between enough and too much, and I don't know where that is. I feel good at the 2, but again, that's just my opinion. So,
Mr. Rock, I wanted to remind you something you said earlier on the top of page 20, under code updates, was $30,000. You said you didn't think that would be necessary. You said that earlier.
Yes, correct.
They had already, I thought you guys had already removed that. somewhere,
Yeah,
right?
well, we took it down to 10,000
Yeah.
instead of 30, so.
I honestly, this is where I think we probably are. I know we're still showing a fairly good deficit on paper. However, tourism has got to be considered kind of a special expenditure. Hesitate to say one time, because I do think we're going to continue to see some need to supplement it with general fund going forward. But I don't think we're going to need to be at 160. And so, in year one here, we're going to have to utilize some of our reserves in order to fund the Red Cedar Inn. But going forward, the need for that should be reduced. With the Prop P coming in, I guess where are we at? We're less than 300K at this point, I think, if I'm not actually doing the math at this point, but.
I have us at, with about 80 grand in ARPA, I have us at 320.78 when you take out the ARPA.
Debbie also mentioned the Seal and Stripe commuter lot and the government center lot. Is that something that we took out? Or we
Yes,
didn't?
yeah,
Okay.
it's not in there right now.
Okay.
It's just listed on the project listing still.
But it's,
Well, let me back up. It could be, if it is, it's in transportation, it's down in general fund.
yeah, oh, okay, never mind. I was incorrect, sorry.
But Steve, if
My
they,
mistake.
so is the transfer general fund, transportation is 60,000. If they reduce anything in transportation, can that transfer be lowered?
Yes, yes. That would be a way to find another 60,000.
Well, I think, to Kim's point earlier, even from the Parks and Rec side, having been on the park board, I know one thing that's on this list that would be a nice to have, but would still be down the road, is that Hawthorne Pond fountain. And that's $10,000, because until more improvements are made to that pond, do we really want to put a fountain in there? So, even if you take 10,000 out of the park side, then that could be a reduction of the parks transfer. I mean, it's only $10,000, but it still helps the bottom number.
Yes,
And then, under transportation, which I know Kim said we could potentially move some things around, for the Osage LED streetlights, are those west of Lamar? Like, could we use SID funds to do those? And then we don't have to pay for them out of pocket, out of that 776 that's in the Osage SID?
I think those are all of the Osage streetlights. That's my understanding from Robert. We certainly can use some CID money for that.
So pretty much, would that be anything west of Lamar then?
Yes, to Noonan Plaza. I mean, that's essentially where the West Osage CID is. I mean, if there's a desire to cut those transfers, the transportation right now, which is at 60, we can do that. It would be a fairly easy thing to do. We have eliminated the streetlights on Thornton Road already. And then you could just eliminate the seal and stripe, the commuter lot, pavement marking, mosquito fog machine, and electronic message. Electronic message board is a great idea. I would love to have one. I think it can, when you're in a budget situation deficit, then that could be cut. Same with the tub grinder.
Is that mosquito fog machine, is that a new one, or is it replacement?
I believe it would be new.
So we'd have 2 of them running then, because I think we only have 1 today, don't we?
Again, Robert.
That'd be a Robert
Robert
question.
would know that. One thing if you wanted to direct us to remove 60,000 from transportation, in consultation with Robert and find the best places to cut, we could certainly do that. Reduce our transportation transfer out of general fund to 0.
Well, if we do the fog machine, the electronic message board, the tub grinder, and the seal and stripe of the government center lot, that's 58,000.
Didn't we already get the message board? Isn't that what this is, or is that a different one?
No. Say again.
The message board.
Where's that?
It's one of those portable message boards.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So right now, we would just rent them from something if we ever needed them.
Yeah, I mean,
I
one of these
apologize.
days it'd be nice to have, and we've talked about it before. But
It's a nice to have, not necessarily
It's
a need to
not a
have.
necessity.
exactly,
Right.
yes.
So that'd be 58K there. And we're currently doing 60.
Correct.
And it seems like we have ARPA money somewhere, and there's nothing else we can do, move around. Where we don't use general and can use ARPA for, or anything like that? And I don't know enough to be helpful there at all.
Well, if you take out that pound, like Heather said, that puts you at another 10. Reduce that 10.
And we're doing 120 to parks right now? Is that correct?
Right, correct.
17.
Yes.
So if you were to even take that down just to 100,
Or, yeah.
because then you could do that 10 from the Hawthorne Pond.
I'm still struggling with the Prop P money, and you're taking money out of the parks. I don't know. I don't like when voters vote for something and they
That's-
know where the tax dollars are going to go, and then
It's a different
cities.
Prop P, I think.
No, I'm not talking about okay, so it's, like I said, I'm still back on the police one.
Okay,
But at the same time, the same with the parks. When someone votes on something and they're paying additional sales tax on something, I mean, the expectation is that excess money is going into something, that you're voting to put it in there. And if the city pulls money out of that, then your money's really not adding to the parks.
but correct me if I'm wrong, so the 50% from the Prop P park and stormwater tax is still going to the Parks Department. But then in addition to that, we are taking $120,000 a year from the general fund to add on top of that.
Yes,
Correct?
correct.
So we're talking about taking that 120 additional.
Before the proposition, though, what was being put in there?
Very little,
Really?
yes.
Yes.
Like maybe 50,000 a year, maybe.
There were some years.
Okay, so there was.
And
like
there's some years there was nothing
so
going to the
there was like
parks.
50,000 going in there, then
Prop P
it was
happened.
voted on, and then city upped what they were giving, what we were giving, I guess, in addition to the 50%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. So they would still be getting the 50% into the parks, but instead of the.
I know
100
we're
yeah,
not taking
yeah.
money from what was voted.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, it's the same thing with looking at the money that's supposed to go to the police,
Mm-hmm.
where you take $100,000 from that, it's the same principle to me. If this bucket was always going, and now because there's this new tax bucket from the taxpayers, you're going to reduce the size of the first bucket. I'm not a fan of that at all.
Right, I understand, yes,
That's
no.
all I'm saying.
Yes,
If
so
we're not
basically.
doing that, then so be it. But
Correct.
if we are,
I just want to make sure
Not on
we're
board with
clear on the police side of what James is talking about. That 100 grand that we're pulling out is going straight to payroll, right? That's not,
Yes, correct.
okay, so we're not randomly taking money out and spending it on other things.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Oh, just want to make sure. So that's going in advance of the need for the payroll, I guess, then, is what you're doing with that?
Yes. Let me just make a comment on Prop P.
Police prop.
I feel very strongly about Prop P. It is, the ballot language restricted it for law enforcement compensation purposes only. We have, since Prop P was established, increased law enforcement payroll by some big number. Don't have it right at my fingertips. Prop P was a piece of that. The city more than matched that in order to get to the level of compensation that we're at right now. So it wasn't that we said, oh, here's Prop P, we're going to insert Prop P, but take away other money. We never did that. Never.
No, okay, and I'm not saying you've done it in the past. I'm saying if you're taking 100,000 now, I worry that we're getting below where we were before Prop P. And if we're not, then I have no issue. If we are, then I have an issue. You know what I'm saying? So just making up numbers now, not real. If you were putting 500,000 in salaries, benefits, everything prior to the proposition, and then the proposition passes and the city goes up to $750,000 plus the money that came in from the proposition, and now you want to take the 250 back out, I'm okay with that. But if, you know,
Yeah,
I don't
I
know
mean,
if I'm explaining what I'm trying to say.
I think so. I think it might be better to understand where the reserve came from. We anticipated Prop P revenues at a certain number, and that was implemented to the budget. And so that then became the amount that we transferred out of Prop P each month. And so we forecasted short, right? So there was more money coming into Prop P than we had anticipated. We also increased pay and benefits for police officers across the board. So now to go back to that reserve, which was, in a sense, not anticipated or not budgeted at least, and put that back into compensation, I think is fine myself. Because we have increased the staffing level in police by one officer, which actually pay and benefits together equal about 90,000. So is that helpful?
I'll have to go back and look at the numbers to get my head around it, and I've got time, so it's fine. I'm just trying to make sure that we're not
So
switching buckets around, that's all.
one of the reasons the reserve was originally created, at least in my opinion, when I voted for it, is because it was always an assumed revenue model. If there was a severe downturn in Franklin County taxes, we would have reserve to be able to still pay what we had forecasted or what we hired or whatever it was. After talking to Steve today, I don't know if it's absolutely necessary anymore now that we have a pretty consistent map of where those taxes lay every year. I don't know personally if the reserve's even necessary anymore, because if we put all of it into the budget, then we would just budget it appropriately. So I think there's probably a bigger discussion to be had regarding it. Your concern is absolutely justified. And I think that's where some of the confusion is. And I know Steve put it in his report, and then after talking to him this morning, if all the revenues were just available and then we properly budgeted them, there'd probably be a little bit of less confusion, because you're not the first person that's been confused by this thing. There was, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, there was concern that we were spending it on crazy stuff when we weren't. And if you really read the language of what we were doing, it was straight to payroll.
Moving from the reserve isn't my issue at all. I mean, I absolutely understand you're putting extra money aside,
Sure.
15% or whatever it is. I absolutely get that. And I don't mind taking from the reserve to use it for pay and benefits. And the whole premise of everything, Andy, is that if if that money is used to back something else out that, that the city would normally have paid, then it's an issue, because Prop P isn't extra, isn't what, doesn't pay extra money. I know the city's paying extra money, it's not a question, and we can table this and
Well,
talk about it
I think I
offline
can,
even.
I think I can speak to this. I've been very careful to watch the budget and to go back. In fact, even before I was elected, I went back and looked at the budget to see what it was before Prop P. It is my opinion that the city has fully funded a police department at a level exceeding where they needed to be to be right with the Prop P wording. So they have not, the Prop P wording says they can't fall back on the budget, as you know, they can't go back. They have not. They've added more money every year. They've increased the police budget and they've added Prop P to it. So it's my feeling that this budget that is offered for the police department this year is adequate to fund the police department. It meets all the needs of the police department, and I think that the reduction of the Prop P at the money that we say is appropriate to add the extra officer. And I think as long as we're trending just like we are, I think this is exactly what the taxpayers want. They want a good public safety department that's funded where we can get competitive, good police officers. And I think that in the last year, we've seen that increase over and over. We had 4 applicants the other day vying for 2 spots. So we're doing a good job. I feel very confident that this budget does not do anything anywhere near what you say, but I think it's well founded what you're saying, because I had those exact same concerns when I came in here and I started looking at the budget and seeing where it was going, but I don't have those today, and I think the budget's going in the right direction. I don't want to see it cut anymore, because I feel like the budget shortfall is not due to police budgeting. I think it's other things in the budget that are higher than taxpayers want, but I don't want to see the police budget cut any, but I don't think where we are is in jeopardy.
Okay, I'm done.
Steve, can't we use some of the excess ARPA reserves to do some of our bigger purchases, for the, accounting program, stuff like that? That falls under that realm of operating funds. And then toward the end of this coming year, when we have, we have excess, that we didn't budget for, we took in more revenue than you anticipated, then we can move that back over to ARPA?
I think the answer is yes and no. Can we use the ARPA money for the accounting software purchase?
Yeah, or something, or
Yes.
purchases like that.
My understanding is yes, we can do that. Could we use the ARPA money now, and then if our revenues improve, can we move it back into ARPA? No, not really. I mean, it would just be another source of revenue that we could use for some other purpose. We have been advised pretty strongly to focus on capital projects.
That is a capital project.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's a
Smaller one.
it is.
But we have several of those smaller, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 items that we could use that for.
Well, honestly, and this thought literally just now occurred to me, a better use of funds, I think, would be the police vehicles. We're budgeted right now at $123,000. Those are a purchase that clearly is within the normal scope of city operations, and you could document the procurement, I think, to the satisfaction of the feds through state contract purchasing and so forth.
I'm all for that.
And really, I think that would fill a $123,000 hole, so to speak.
Where does that put us at, Mayor?
Well, if we, hold on.
Can I add one thing while you're adding that up?
Sure.
As I kind of listen to what everybody said, and including what James said, it almost seems we're cutting and then we're moving and then we're cutting. It almost seems very confusing. I don't know if that's kind of how you're feeling a little bit with some of that. It almost seems we should just take some big chunks, i.e. the police cars that we just talked about, rather than going back and reducing, we're going to cut this, or we're going to leave this, but we're going to cut the fund and how much we're putting into it. Like, it almost just seems like a lot of unnecessary movement, whereas if we just cut a couple big chunks, get ourselves in a number that we like, it seems less confusing for us. I would assume it's probably less confusing for the citizens when they watch and hear and read and do all those kind of things with the budget. Because even now, as we keep talking through it, even following along sometimes to what we're going to move and what we're going to do makes it incredibly difficult to figure out exactly what we're doing. I'm not saying we're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying it gets very confusing very quickly. And maybe we just go after some big hit items. And then what usually happens is halfway through the year, we realize that our revenues are either on track or higher than,
That's right. That's what I
because
said
Steve is
earlier.
very conservative, which I appreciate about him. And then we slowly start to put some of these things back as the year progresses, rather than doing all these other wild and crazy ideas. I think it might be better for us to just take some big chunks and then, I don't know, usually by fall is when Steve realizes that we have a lot of extra juice to play with, and then we can start piling back in some of those things that we cut. I don't think it's necessarily right to start cutting all of what we're putting into funds. And I think that's kind of what you're saying to an extent, if I remember right.
Yeah,
Right.
honestly, it's just protecting what the voters voted for, period.
Well,
Just what they voted for is what continues to happen.
Sure.
That's it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not
No, absolutely.
moving things around different places.
Like, I don't-
Still does that, I'm fine with it. Just, I have to see it, and I will,
Yeah.
before I agree to it.
Sure. I just think maybe if we just cut those big items, it might make this easier to digest and easier to understand too. I don't know how you guys feel about that, or if that makes any sense, anything I just said.
Well, based on all of my notes here and with what you just said, so if we take the 570,000 deficit, we go ahead and remove the 50,000 for rebranding. We reduce the zoning or the code updates from 30 to 20. Then we take out what ARPA funding we kind of have built in here, plus the 123,000 if we get that ARPA funded. So those two together. Not touching the transportation transfer amount, not touching the park transfer amount, and not touching the Prop P reserve amount. That would put us to 297,798. If we went ahead and moved the Prop P reserve over to general fund for salary compensation that way, then that'd put us up to 197,798. Based on
The
my
one
math.
item I don't think I heard you say was the water meter. That's.
I did not include that anywhere in this. So if we get ARPA funding for that,
Well, that was half-half. 250 was ARPA, 250 was out of the general fund, so that one would reduce it 250. And I think that's to the point that the administrator made, which is just doing it all in 1 year with the other projects just probably isn't advisable. It does seem
Right.
logical, given that advice, to push that off to next year, and it would be an obvious one to reduce 250.
Right, but that does not affect general fund. It's
Oh,
bud-
that's, okay.
It's budget and water.
Yeah, water and sewer has to maintain that law.
It's a
so yeah, so that would put us right under 300,000,
Yeah. I just-
or right under 200,000, depending.
I know.
I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but, I mean, I'll definitely look at it closer, but hearing Chief say he's not worried about that transfer, then I'll look and make sure I'm not either, but I would say I'm going to find that I'm not either.
Okay.
You said 297 without the 100, right?
Correct.
What is where the deficit would sit, or is that what it would reduce it by?
That's where it would sit.
Oh, and I think Steve was fine around that number, right?
Correct. And then if we go ahead and move the Prop P reserve fund over,
But even if we don't do that,
we're still at right under 300,000. If we do
Which I
that,
think
then we're
is-
under
We can do
200.
that later in the year.
I think that's normally where we're at in a deficit, right?
Yeah, typically we're less than 2. Yeah. I don't want to linger on Prop P. I know it's getting late. Prop P must be used for law enforcement compensation. It will be. There's no question about it. It's a matter of when. And given the fact that we're in a deficit and given the fact that the police payroll has increased with the recent addition of the officers and so forth, I think there's a clear argument for the transfer now to address the deficit. But, whether we do it now or later, it's still at some point going to hit law enforcement compensation.
Right. So then that would put us at 197, 798 for a deficit. And we wouldn't have to reduce our transportation transfer or the park transfer. At all.
Are you good with that?
I am, yes.
Now me trying to re-understand my notes here
No,
will be the,
and I know I wasn't necessarily taking notes,
that's
but
okay, I got it.
I can, yes. Okay, so can we move on? I know it's late, but I hope it's been good discussion. Let's at least hit some of these remaining funds. Let's see, where are we at?
What page are you on?
Okay, tourism tax,
What page?
page 38.
Thank you.
Okay, so I do think it's be helpful for the board to understand how we are funding Red Cedar. And this has been through the Tourism Commission and was recommended for approval. There's been a couple little minor tweaks since that time, but it's essentially the same form as what tourism saw. We're anticipating $100,000 in hotel taxes. We have grant revenues, one from St. Louis County Municipal Parks, and then another one, which is anticipated. Is that the Humanities Council grant? Have we received that? Okay. And then we have what we call project fund proceeds, and that is what is remaining in the lease purchase project fund once the Red Cedar contract is completed. We do anticipate having about $225,000 remaining in that fund, again, once the main contract is completed. We do anticipate some modest revenues. I have said many, many times that in order for this to work, we're going to have to increase those revenues, no question. But going forward to start, I'm not going to expect those, certainly not in the near term. And then we have that transfer that we discussed earlier from general fund. So we have a total available revenues of $837,000 for tourism here in this fiscal year. Then we get into expenditures. We have a director as well as part-time help, which is budgeted, total budget there, $113,000. In the general expenditures line, tourism wanted $10,000 for their own purposes, and so you see that under Tourism Commission. We get into Red Cedar expenditures. These are just basic operating expenditures. Of course, they're somewhat guesswork at this point. We do think this would be adequate to run the center. We have recommended a $40,000 marketing and promotions budget. That is not insignificant, but when you think about it in terms of a full 12-month year, it's not much more than $3,000 per month. That's not a lot of budget, let's face it. In marketing promotions, you can spend that rather quickly. We, as much as, we might like to have more budget, we just didn't feel like we could extend that any further. And then we get into some contractual expenditures. The tourism has funded Iron Horse Rodeo contract. We have an agreement with the Pacific Partnership. I believe that's a 3-year renewable for 2 additional years. I think we're now in year 2 of that. Fireworks, the Tourism Commission wanted to reduce that number. They had been budgeting $12,500. They recommend $8,500. And then we have museum design fees. The city has contracted with Derek Pryor Design, Inc., who is designing exhibits for the museum. General museum consulting, we do feel it's be helpful to have some budget for just basic general consulting going forward. I'm sorry. Yes. All right. Lost my train of thought for a moment. Legal general consulting. This would be obviously what it says. Frankly, there's probably more budget there than we really would need, but at least in year one, it's probably helpful to have that. And then down into capital, we need to buy furnishings, also IT expenditures, as well as equipment. And then finally, the exhibits. When we contracted with Derek Pryor Design Inc., he requested a budget from the city, and his suggestion was 300 on the low to 500. We kind of landed in the middle, and so there's significant expense there. Finally, there's a transfer. Tourism had borrowed from the city previously for the Bigfoot Plaza and the electronic sign. Get down to the bottom line here. We show $836,000 expenditures versus almost the same in revenues, so we show a $470 balance at the end of it. What this says is we believe we can do it at these numbers. It also says we have very little margin for error. And it's just something that we're just going to have to manage very closely. We've got to drive more revenues, no question. Have to do it. The director will be tasked with that. We're just going to have to work on that from the very beginning. Any questions? Okay, hopefully we can hit some of these next ones pretty quickly. Contingency. We talked a lot about that. We are right around 1.8 million. By the end of the year, we should, if that $250,000 transfer to transportation really is intended as a kind of cash flow. All this will come to the board in forms of resolutions. I would want to repay that money, absolutely. These federal aid projects, they're 80-20 matches. The city has a 20% match, but sometimes there's cash flow issues that arise, and almost certainly it's going to happen here. But as the funds come back to us reimbursed, then we would replenish contingency. Capital improvement sales tax. This is one of those where my initial budget was lower than 560, but when you look at our experience from 2021, I had to increase. I think my initially it was around 520. So even at 560, we're kind of even with 2021. None of us like inflation, but there's no question there has an impact on your sales tax receipts. As far as expenditures, what we're doing here is using capital improvements essentially as a transfer fund into transportation. And so we're proposing $600,000 there, which amounts to $50,000 per month. Assuming the board would approve it, that's what we would do. We just start transferring those funds directly into transportation and build reserves for the big projects coming down the pike. Leasehold bond revenue, this is basically a debt service fund. Kim transfers money every month into this account, and then we pay the debt service. I think that's an annual payment. Is that right? Once a year? Viaduct CID, as I said earlier, that has been terminated. We did take, that's not a misprint up there, we have received less than $1, or maybe it's, I forget what it is. It zeros, or it rounds to 1. But, yeah, essentially that is, CID is terminated. And then we do want to clear this fund out in this fiscal year. Next page, Osage. This is what we call West Osage. That CID has shrunk. Some properties have been eliminated, but it still does generate some revenue, and that's the source of funds for the Route 66 Marketplace Road, as well as the West Osage sidewalk connections. They should, I did not notice today if there's been any clearing done, but that work should be done starting in literally any day.
There's a sign up, like construction, but I didn't drive up there to see if. But I did notice there's a new construction sign closer to Osage.
Yeah, they're going to clear out that tree line. So,
That's exciting.
yep, that'll be the first bit of work. East Osage, we're maintaining that fund even though it's been terminated for the First and Osage intersection improvement. You see the 156,900, those are engineering fees, and I believe there's some right-of-way in there. Yes, I think so. Voluntary flood buyout, we have applied for a grant. We have not been awarded, so we're keeping that fund at 0 at the moment. No budget in that fund. Prop P, this is where all the money comes in. One thing I talked to Chief Melius about earlier, I guess it was last week, I have provided various information about Prop P over the years. What I'd really like to do is just an absolute hard, detailed accounting of Prop P expenditures, revenues, and city expenditures, and just put it all on a one worksheet so it's clear to anybody. It's essentially, again, just a kind of a transfer fund, if you will. And then in transportation, here again, we've got the 3 federal aid projects. Well, they're not all budgeted out of here. The Denton Road Bridge is, and then Highway in Phase 4. So what you see is revenues, that's the 80% piece. And then further down in expenditures, you'll see the total project budget. We do a lot of things in transportation. Total payroll, pay and benefits together is 404,170. Tree removal, curbs and walks, fuel and oil equipment, all sorts of operating expenditures. Street lights, I've often talked about this, 294,25. We pay $120,000 a year for street lights, and this is not the Osage street lights. This is just your, normal street lights through town. So that's a fair expense. A little bit of budget for engineer. Most of our engineering contracts are project specific, so we really don't have a lot of just general engineering costs. Capital expenditures, we have a dump truck, and there's also some water and sewer money. You're not going to buy a dump truck for $40,000. We have $50,000 budget in water and sewer. Equipment, there's a lot of items in there, the tub grinder, different things. Some of that will need to be adjusted. That Osage street lights, that remains in the budget. And I do want to talk to Robert a little bit about exactly where and if we can use any of the CID funds for that. Finally, in the capital, you see Denton Road Bridge, Highway in Phase 4. We also plan to do preventive maintenance construction this year. Total budget there is $553 between construction and engineering. I'm meeting with engineers tomorrow morning, by the way. The Thornton Viaduct project is complicated, and we're trying to figure out the best approach. I think there's sufficient budget there. We should be fine. We can use ARPA money for overages if we have to, so there's a little bit of a cushion. Okay, Parks and Storm. Sales tax is split two ways. Parks and Storm obviously get 50/50. We have various miscellaneous revenues, user charges. Then we have the transfers in from general fund as well as ARPA. We are recommending $250,000 in ARPA funding for ADA improvements in the parks. This has been discussed at the park board level. This is, in our opinion, a must-have. Any of this moving forward, of course, the board will see various resolutions and all sorts of different things as we go. But this is something, again, it's part of my meeting tomorrow with the engineers to get better understanding of the scope of that project. We're really talking about resurfacing all the park roads, as well as parking lots, at least most of them. And then we get into operating expenditures. To the capital expenditures, dog park, 35 grand should be sufficient budget. It's been a need for quite some time. Park improvements, these are going to be itemized on the capital expenditures sheets. I don't have them in front of me. And then we have ADA improvements and pavement repair, striping. And so together, I am actually short. That's my bad. I need to increase those to match up with the 250 that was transferred out of ARPA. This is an earlier budget, and I overlooked that.
I know, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know at one of the rodeo meetings, we had discussed the potential of running electric and light towers and all that to the rodeo arena. Was that discussed as part of this budget?
Yes.
Is that in this budget?
Yes, it is. What we've done, there's about 52,000 in the rodeo fund right now, and so we're budgeting 50, and we anticipate hopefully getting those electric improvements made and potentially some bleachers in that. Now I know it's getting close to rodeo time. In my opinion, the electric would be a priority. And again, we have rodeo proceeds or rodeo fund that covers this. So this is not general fund or park sales tax money.
Okay, thank you.
Swimming pool, we're trying to run the swimming pool kind of on a very limited basis as far as our expenditures. We're going through a planning project now, and so we really don't want to spend a lot of money on the pool in this season as we look forward to what may be the next phase. We are, of course, going to operate. And then finally turning the page into the storm budget. We're giving ourselves a little bit of budget here for materials and supplies, some general planning services, consulting, engineering, and then TBD, to be determined. We really do want to apply for the state money. And right now what we're envisioning is $750,000 in state ARPA and $250,000 in city funds, and we have the money. We have a fair balance right now in storm. So, okay, nearing the end. Debt service fund. This is where the money is transferred in and then expended for our various debt obligations. We do the contract for the Red Cedar. We've spent $1.4 million through March 31st. We would have some additional expenses, obviously yet in this fiscal year. We would anticipate $800,000 to close the project out in the next fiscal year. And then that, of course, is zeroed out. That is a revenue that I'm looking at in the top line, and then, we're just zeroing out with our expenditures. The project fund, just so you all know, the lease purchase, we just draw on it. So it's not money in the bank that we can use. We draw on it whenever we have a payment. And then finally, in the water and sewer. Without Robert here, I don't know that we have to get in great detail. I'm frankly not prepared to get into great detail, honestly, as far as some of the capital expenditures. We've spent, in general, we've really, a lot of the focus has been on wastewater, and out of necessity, has to be. And this year, again, major sewer improvement. However, we are starting to try to lay the groundwork for some of needed water improvements. The water meters are probably the top priority, and then some of this other work related to reservoirs, so forth. Water and sewer funds in general are pretty strong. Our rates are very comparable. In fact, I think they remain on the low end when you compare us to other communities, especially when you compare us to the public water districts, the regulated utilities. We're certainly on the low end. Okay, so covered a lot of ground. I'm not sure what more needs to be done at this point.
We got to have this done by when?
June 7th is the hearing, required public hearing. I sent that notice today, 2 weeks from tomorrow night. And then the first reading of the budget bills will be that night. And then the budget needs to be adopted the following meeting in June 21st. So there's time, absolutely, for changes, adjustments, so forth. The budget does need to be published for the public hearing, and I'll basically do that tomorrow, because the notice will be in the newspaper on Wednesday.
Any
Anything
questions?
No more questions?
All righty.
I think it was well prepared. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Everybody
and-
for your
And
hard
you
work.
over there.
well, thank you, and I always like to try to stay at 2 hours, and I know we went a little bit over, but
James's fault.
I hope it was helpful.
Nice use of third person.
Right. All right, is there any other any miscellaneous to discuss? I think we've pretty much covered it all. All right, well, with nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make that motion to adjourn.
I have a motion by Alderman Presley. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Alderman Cleve. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.
Rick, you didn't say anything all night, and that was the quickest thing out of your mouth.